Netflix has finally launched in Australia.
But was it worth the wait? Welcome to Vertical Hold, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Adam Turner. I'm here with the man who's always pixel perfect, Alex Kidman. Alex, what's new in tech?
Just days before the New South Wales state election, it was revealed that the iVote electronic voting system was susceptible to the widely publicised freak flaw. What this meant was that, in theory, someone could intercept a vote, read its entire contents, but it's not just that, then alter them to whatever they liked without the voter being aware at all. For its part, the New South Wales Electoral Commission insists that nothing like that actually took place with the 60,000 votes that have been cast up to that point, and that the flaw itself has been patched.
Foxtel players slashing prices again for this season of Game of Thrones, letting you add the HBO package for only an extra $5 a month. Of course, there's some extra competition this year as Australians try to sneak into HBO's own new HBO Now streaming service, which is set to launch in April.
Nintendo's announced that it's finally bringing its popular gaming characters to the smartphone and tablet world, but not in the way you might think. It's bought a hefty chunk of fellow Japanese developer DNA, and it's DNA that will handle Mario and chums when they come to your iPhone or Android device. This isn't a case, though, of old games being ported to new platforms. Instead, they'll be completely new titles that happen to feature Nintendo characters, so it's more like you'll get Angry Mario or Flappy Link than you'll actually see Ocarina of Time or Super Mario World.
For people who find it too hard to remember their password, Yahoo's coming to the rescue with new Yahoo On-Demand passwords. It's a bit like two-factor authentication, except you don't need that pesky first factor of remembering your password. Instead, when you want to get into your email, Yahoo will just text you a temporary password to type in. Too bad if someone else gets their hand on your phone.
Now, Adam, it feels like we've been talking about it forever, because to a certain extent we have, but Netflix Australia has finally launched in this last week in Australia officially. It's legit, it's here. But was it worth the wait?
It really depends on how you want to look at it. It wasn't really worth the wait for the library that's on offer right now, but it probably is worth the wait in the long term. Well,
if we're talking US versus Australia,
there's a lot less in the... If you use US Netflix now, most of probably what you're watching over there is not in the Australian library. So, like me, you're like, where's my Bob's Burgers? Where's my Archer? Where's my Doctor Who? Where's my Star Trek? All these things aren't there. Why the hell should I give you my money? But I've got to remember that not everybody's coming from that perspective. If you want to look at it from a glass half full perspective, one of the interesting things is that a big chunk of the Netflix Australian library is Australian content that doesn't actually show up in the US library. So it's not just, we're not just getting a tiny subset of what Americans get, we're actually getting our own library. And the big point that Netflix made to me is, don't judge us on day one because we'll grow over time. So as the seed that is going to grow from it looks promising.
That's kind of what everyone says, though.
It is what everybody says. But Netflix has got the track record to stand by, though. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, from at least one analysis I've seen suggests that we've got, in pure numbers terms, and width is not the be-all and end-all, but in pure numbers terms, we've got maybe an eighth of about the size of the US library. But a reasonable chunk of that, yeah, as you say, is this kind of superset of content that isn't on the US service, that is much more local content. There's also some real oddities in there. As an example, if you're on Australian Netflix, you get Mythbusters, which currently isn't on US Netflix, although it has been previously. But, at the time of writing, only one season of it. Yeah. There's an awful lot of Mythbusters they could be showing. The same story is actually true of Doctor Who. US Netflix has got classic Doctor Who, which makes me very happy in theory. Australian Netflix only really has New Who, which is still good, but it could be better. Yeah. And some of this, of course, ties into the rights deals that were already signed by others before Netflix had launched here. Still, it's a pretty impressive launch, especially when you look at their price points, or at least I think so. What's your call on that?
Well, it is probably about what we expected. The fact that they're managing to dodge the GST is interesting. But yeah...
From a strictly legal point of view, though, they're not... Well, I mean, I know I've written...
Okay, dodging's maybe not the right word. Yeah, but the fact that they're managing to not charge
GST is the way to put it. And this has not made a number of people happy, and obviously it does give them a certain competitive advantage.
Yes.
Whether or not you view it right or wrong.
It is interesting they've followed the new structure of pricing like they've got in the US, which is 3 tiers depending on how many people you want to be able to watch it at once and the quality you want. Where in the past, if you've been using Netflix for a couple of years in the US, you might still be on the old pricing where there were less tiers. So you need to think straight away, how many people do I want to be watching it, or more likely, what kind of quality do I want? Now, some people will say, oh, I've got a dodgy internet connection, it's not very good, I'll go with the standard def. But Netflix actually has probably the best adaptive streaming that going around in terms of squeezing a good picture down a small pipe.
It's really, I don't disagree with your central idea there, but it's really interesting you say that, because I'd viewed Netflix plans the exact opposite way.
Yeah.
Just to kind of clarify, Netflix offers 3 different, in Australia and in the US now, if you're on a new plan, offers 3 different plans. You get a single stream standard def plan, you get a 2 streams at once HD plan, or you get a 4 streams at once up to Ultra HD plan, as Adam said, depending on the quality of your connection. And yeah, they are quite good at adaptive streaming. The thing is, I suspect for a lot of Australian consumers, they won't have an Ultra HD panel, so that part of the quality equation is a bit of a furphy anyway. Yeah. And it's actually the fact that you can have these 4 streams going. So I can be watching something, my wife can be watching something, my kids can be watching something for only that little bit more on top of it versus the single stream or double stream plans. I think it's actually the number of connected streams that sells it more than the quality per se.
But you've got to have an internet connection that will handle those 4 streams. That's the thing, is that 2 people in my house could probably watch Netflix without too much trouble. 4 and they'd be shouting at each other. So, yeah, it is going to come down to the individual house.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You've still got to have the broadband muscle to actually handle it at all. Yeah. But yeah, and certainly for a large number of Australian consumers, that's going to be a genuine, huge problem. At least, though, as with Presto, as with Stan, you can sign up for a 30-day trial. You can work out what works. Yeah. Although what I found interesting there, having a look at their trial setup, is they actually say you can specify when you're signing up for the trial, well, which of our plans would you like to trial? And I can't work out the logic where anyone's going to go, oh, I only want to trial 1 stream, not let you give me 4 of them for nothing. What about competitively? Because Netflix is, you know, it's the elephant in the room in terms of being this huge US mega conglomerate. It's got a lot of money to throw at this stuff. It does its own original programming, but it's by no means first to market. I know we've covered some of this stuff before, but we didn't have access to what Netflix has. You've still got Stan out there, you've still got Presto out there, and there's some news and movement in those spaces as well. How do you think they're stacking up on day one, bearing in mind that, yeah, 6 months down the track, this could all be quite different?
Well, to me, I think it's Netflix and Quickflix who have the clear advantage because they work on so many devices. And this, again, comes down to how your individual wants to use it. But Netflix very quickly turned up on your Apple TV, on your games consoles. I couldn't get it working on the Chromecast, but it may be working by now. A couple of other devices as well. And Quickflix has been there for a while as well. You might have it on your Blu-ray player, you might have it on your smart TV. Now, if you're paying this kind of money, you don't necessarily want to sit down and watch it on your smartphone, your tablet, or your computer. This is where Stan's probably coming dead last here, because Presto has the advantage of being in bed with Foxtel and Telstra, so it's managed to get its way onto the T-Box. And if you've got a T-Box, I think they're offering you 6 months, I think it is now, free for Presto.
Yeah, you get a 6 months freebie if you're a T-Box customer, and if you're getting Presto through Telstra, it's quota free, and if you're on Foxtel's rather interesting broadband plans, they're also quite free for their own services.
And plus it works with the Chromecast. Now, Stan works with the Chromecast as well, but I've had dodgy experiences with the Chromecast. I've heard a lot of people say that the Chromecast is dodgy. Stan itself seems to be a bit temperamental, so it's not really the best for trying to watch in the lounge room.
It's interesting you say that, because my experiences have been a little different, and obviously people's experiences can differ depending on when they're hitting the server, what their broadband connection is like, and so on. Stan has been more stable, and it's probably worth pointing out as well, Stan works across Chromecast, and it'll also do via AirPlay out to
Yes,
Apple
it will
TV,
do
but
AirPlay streaming in the Apple TV.
Which Presto won't. Presto has crashed a little bit more on me, and to be fair, their streaming services, they all crash. Your network connection gets busy, their server gets busy. These are not 100% bulletproof services. None of them. Netflix will have this too. But Presto has crashed on me, and the annoying thing with Presto is they only allow you 2 simultaneous streams. There's no high-level streaming plan available with them. And this is a bit of a hangover from being Foxtel, because they do similar things with Foxtel Play and Go.
Yeah.
But Presto only allows you 2, but if you're streaming out to a Chromecast, it counts the device you're streaming from as 1 and the Chromecast as another.
So there's your 2
it eats
right
up
there.
both your streams. So if it crashes, you're actually out of watching something for up to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Which Stan, to its credit, doesn't do. But yeah, experiences can differ. And again, that whole trial thing, take them up on it, because that's really how, on an individual level, testing your broadband connection, how you're actually going to know, right, this works for me and this doesn't. The other advantage, though, I would say with a trial, and the other reason why they're so valuable, is because of the thing that is really key to this whole argument, and that is content. That is working out whose content is right for you, because you're interested in Archer and Bob's Burgers. I've not watched so much of those, but I've got my own particular TV viewing passions. As such, and I know we've said this before, there's no real, one service to rule them all, is there?
And that's the thing, content is the real X factor. I think that's why I tend to judge them on other factors. Like I said, one of the great things about Netflix is there's no limits to the number of devices you can watch it on, just the number you can watch it on simultaneously. But when it comes to content, it's like, okay, well, somebody's got Better Call Saul, somebody else has got Gotham, somebody else has got HBO stuff. I don't know at the end of the day if one TV show is enough for someone to say, I will go with this one and not the other one. But as soon as you start thinking, maybe I'll pay for 2 of them, maybe I'll pay for 3 of them, suddenly Foxtel or BitTorrent, depending on which way you lean, start to look more attractive. So it is kind of frustrating. There are a couple of them I think, I want a little bit of you and a little bit of you. And yeah, if Foxtel can keep Foxtel Play pricing quite reasonable, then it starts to look pretty attractive compared to what you get to a couple of these put together.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the Presto long game. They can't let Presto get too good, because otherwise it starts to dig into Foxtel itself. But
they can't let it be too bad, or they lose everybody to the others.
Absolutely. It's a tightrope walking act. But Foxtel's in an interesting position here as well, because while it's done some interesting stuff recently, I mean, Presto and the T-Box tie-up for 6 months is an interesting one. It's announcing new programs that it's bringing to Presto, as Stan is, because they're both feeling the pressure from Netflix. And, of course, Foxtel's launched its new IQ3 box this week.
Yes.
And that's not... I'm sure the timing there is not coincidental either.
Oh, they claimed it was. They told me that it just happened to be the day that it was ready.
Yeah. There's some kind of phrase about monkeys and flying in my backside that might be applicable there. But I guess the other thing for Foxtel, though, is that all of this streaming is not necessarily good news for them, because whilst these kind of services are really, really broad, you get a Netflix or a Stan or a Presto and you're getting a whole lot of TV, a whole lot of movies. You're getting comedy and you're getting drama and you're getting all, like a TV channel kind of selection. A bit of everything. Yeah. There's also a big, strong growth in a lot of niche broadcasting, especially for Foxtel's real breadbasket, which is sports. A lot of US sports, for example, you can now pay the NBA or the NFL a set sum and watch everything. And as you know, I'm not a huge sports fanatic. But the sports fanatic friends that I have actually say, look, what you get for doing that is actually better than what you'd get in the States, because they do that whole blackout thing where if the local game isn't sold out, they can't show it. Yeah. But of course, you're nowhere near the local game, so they just show it to you anyway.
That's the next big frontier here in Australia, is that kind of streaming services for sport. And at the moment, a lot of our major codes do have that kind of streaming service, but it's mostly only available to expats. If you're overseas, you can pay online to watch the AFL or the NRL or whatever else you want to watch. But if you're here, sorry, you can't do that, because you've got to be giving your Foxtel your money, which is where your VPN can actually work in reverse. Because if it looks like you're in the United States, then yeah, sure,
then you can
come
sign
on
up for
in.
these services.
Then you can sign up for these services which are being run next door, who won't let you in because you're a local. So yeah, that's one.
As long as your broadband's good enough, because suddenly you're hopping back and forth and back and forth.
But this is what you see, and the Apple TV is a really great example. You see the baseball app, you see the ice hockey app, you see a couple of other apps, and all these great services that you can stream matches and other sport. And what we get here is pretty average in comparison. It's because Sport's a big thing. Sport's always been, the golden goose of broadcasting. All the media moguls know it, and they're gonna fight tooth and nail against that kind of stuff.
I think sport's also interesting, and again, as you know, I'm no big sports fan, but I think sport's interesting in this context because it strikes me that it's something that benefits from being live. People want to watch it as it's happening, and I get that. But I don't think, this is from an external non-sports fan perspective, I don't think it's stuff that's got huge replay value in the same way as having the full run of Dexter or the full run of True Blood or whatever you want to show has to a Netflix or a Stan or a Presto.
It doesn't have replay value, but it has greater value to people. If you say to them, do you want to be able to see the entire back catalogue of whatever show that you could maybe go out and buy on DVD or get from a dozen different sources, or do you want to be able to see your team play live every week? That experience of seeing your team play live is worth a lot to them, which is why they can charge so much for it. Alright, so realistically, you and I, we're men of the world. We've both got US Netflix accounts. We've had them for a while. We watch the US library. So it's kind of frustrating. And we're not alone there. Depending on how you ask, there's maybe 200,000 of us in Australia doing this. Coming from that perspective, is Netflix coming here anything at all worth getting excited about?
Well, look, from a content perspective, probably not.
Yeah.
There are some unique things in the Australian library which I think, are laudable. They've got some interesting comedy specials, and they've got the potential, obviously, to grab more local content.
They're going to do deals with the ABC. I saw that. That's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, the ABC, it seems, will do deals with anyone for all of its content. The ABC needs money, is, I think, the context here. But, and look, the fact that they're locally available is not necessarily a bad thing, given they make it fairly trivial to switch your region anyway.
Yeah.
And it's probably worth pointing out that, actually, if all your broadband connection can manage is that standard def stream, the standard def pricing here is actually cheaper than the standard def pricing in the US after conversion, which is kind of cool. But at the same time, I think, the existing US via VPN Netflix user base, they're probably not going to switch camps just yet. They put pressure on the local market, and that's both a good and a bad thing. It's good in that, a bit of competition is quite, healthy, and it means these services have to step their game up, and it'll be really interesting to see both whether Stan and Presto alter their pricing or their access models. I've got no doubt that they are racing as fast as they can to get onto games consoles and smart TVs.
Have to be.
Get the client stuff sorted out. The client stuff presumably is just part of a roadmap. But it's whether or not they suddenly say, well, okay, look, Netflix doesn't care how many devices you've got registered, so we won't. Get that stuff sorted out and things get interesting. At the same time, the other problem, though, Netflix is huge and it's got pretty deep coffers, and it can afford to kind of just spend a fair bit of money on Australia and probably not really notice it because it's still raking in the cash in the US, where it accounts for some ridiculous proportion of the internet usage in that country. And there is that potential for it to kind of come in and squash everyone else, at which point it doesn't have competition. Then it's a monopoly, then it's not so good for us.
Yeah. That about wraps it up for another episode of Vertical Hold, and a special cheerio to Cyril the Cricket, who decided to drop into my office during recording.
Thanks, Cyril. And remember, if you like what you see, hammer that subscribe button.